I never meant for it to happen. That's the part people don't believe when I finally say it out loud. They think love always starts with intention, some private decision whispered to yourself late at night. Like you pick a person, and then you pick betrayal. But mine didn't start like that. Mine started quietly, almost invisibly, the way something grows in the dark before you realize it has roots. I fell in love with my sister's fiancé. Even now, admitting it feels like stripping away the last layer of skin I used to protect myself. Because no matter how carefully I explain it, no matter how much context I give, it still sounds the same. Wrong, unforgivable, disgusting. I knew that. I knew it from the beginning. And that knowledge became the heaviest thing I carried. Because the worst part wasn't the feeling. The worst part was how good I got at pretending I didn't have it. From the outside, my life looked solid. I owned a small business I'd built from nothing, the kind of business you don't inherit or fall into. I worked late nights and early mornings, proving to myself I didn't need anyone to survive. People saw me as dependable, the one who always had it together. The sister who didn't create drama, the daughter who didn't ask for help. Inside, though, every day felt like a quiet trial. I woke up each morning with the same question pressing against my chest. What kind of person feels this way and keeps going as if nothing is wrong? At first, I told myself it wasn't love, just admiration. He was kind, genuinely kind, not performative. He listened when people spoke. He remembered details others forgot. He asked my dad about his health. He helped my mom carry groceries without being asked. Compared to the men I had dated, distant, distracted, half-present, he felt different. Safe. Then I told myself it was proximity. We saw each other often. Family dinners, holidays, engagement planning. Of course, feelings could get blurred. That didn't mean anything. But the truth didn't care about my excuses. I noticed the way my chest tightened when he entered a room, the way my attention followed his voice without my permission, the way I caught myself thinking, stupidly, about what he thought of me. And that's when the shame really started. To survive it, I did what people do when they're desperate to protect themselves from guilt. I began looking for reasons my sister didn't deserve him. It wasn't conscious at first. It was just a habit of the mind, a defensive move. Like if I could make her smaller in my head, my feelings would look less monstrous. She was careless sometimes, too impulsive. She drank too much when she went out. She didn't always think before she spoke. I told myself she didn't appreciate him enough, didn't see how rare he was. But every time I tried to build that story, it collapsed. Because the truth was obvious and cruel. She loved him. Deeply. Freely. Without calculation. And he loved her too. At least, that's what it looked like. The problem wasn't her. It was me. And I hated myself for that realization. I hated how small it made me feel, how dishonest. I promised myself I would pull back, create distance, let the feeling starve until it disappeared. That's what adults do, I told myself. That's what good people do. Then the engagement happened. Everyone was happy. Tears, toasts, plans, dates circled on calendars. My sister showed me the ring like it was a miracle, and I smiled so hard my cheeks ached. And when she asked me to be her maid of honor, my first instinct was to say no. So quickly my body reacted before my voice did. My heart started racing before she even finished the sentence. I don't know if I'm the best choice, I said, forcing a laugh, forcing a smile, forcing my face into something harmless. She waved it off like I was being ridiculous. Of course I was. Who else would it be? I was her sister, her best friend, the reliable one. My family agreed instantly. Saying no would have raised questions I wasn't ready to answer. Questions I didn't even have safe answers for. So I swallowed the fear and said yes. I told myself being close would force the feeling to die. That reality would crush whatever fantasy my brain had constructed. That seeing them plan a future together would finally make it impossible for me to pretend this was anything but a sickness I needed to cure. Instead, it made everything worse. Wedding preparations brought us together constantly. Dress fittings, venue visits, group dinners. I avoided being alone with him, always finding excuses to step away, to stay busy, to go refill someone's drink or check my phone. I spoke to him politely, carefully, never crossing a line. But lines don't always require words. There were moments, brief, almost imperceptible, when our eyes met and held for a second too long. When conversations ended and silence lingered in a way that felt unfinished. I told myself it was in my head, that I was projecting, that I was so guilty I was inventing meaning where there was none. I needed to believe that. Because the alternative would mean he noticed something too. And if he noticed, then this wasn't just my problem anymore. Sometimes, late at night, I'd lie awake and think, if I can just make it to the wedding, everything will be safe again. Once they're married, it will be final, permanent, untouchable. I didn't know yet how fragile final can be. The night everything changed began like any other celebration. We went out together, the three of us, to toast the upcoming wedding. It was meant to be light, harmless. One last relaxed evening before final preparations swallowed everything. I didn't drink much. I was always careful. My sister didn't. She laughed louder than usual, ordered another round without thinking, leaning into the excitement of it all. He tried to slow her down gently, but she waved him off. Relax, she teased him. It's my wedding. By the time we decided to leave, she could barely stand. I'm fine, she insisted, slurring the words. I'm just happy. He looked at me with a mixture of concern and apology. Can you help me get her home? I wanted to say no. Not because it was unreasonable, but because I could already feel something tightening in my chest. Something that didn't feel like fear. It felt like inevitability, like a door slowly closing. But there was no excuse. No reason to refuse without looking suspicious. So I nodded. The car ride was quiet. My sister drifted in and out of sleep, her head against the window. He focused on the road, jaw tight. I watched streetlights blur past, counting breaths, reminding myself this was just another responsibility. Nothing more. At her apartment, we guided her inside. She laughed again, leaning on both of us, heavy and uncoordinated. We placed her on the bed, helped her take off her shoes. She fell asleep almost instantly, as if her body had finally surrendered. I stood there a moment longer than necessary, then turned toward the door. I should go, I said softly. I was already reaching for my coat when he said my name. I stopped. He didn't come closer. He didn't touch me. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, staring at the floor like the right words were hidden under it. I've been having doubts, he said. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. About the wedding? I asked, even though the answer felt obvious. He nodded. About everything. I should have left right then. I know that now. But curiosity is dangerous when it meets vulnerability. And something in the way he said it felt heavy, real. Then you shouldn't get married, I said. My voice surprised me with how steady it sounded. He looked up, and our eyes met. Something shifted in that moment. Something fragile, something irreversible, like a thread pulled too hard. I care about her, he said. I do. But sometimes I think I care more about someone else. The room suddenly felt too small, too quiet. I didn't ask who. I didn't need to. My body reacted before my mind could protect me. Heat climbed up my neck. My hands went cold. He stepped closer, not fast, not aggressive. just close enough that I could feel his warmth, that familiar scent I'd tried to ignore. He looked like someone standing on the edge of a cliff, not sure if he was about to jump. And then the kiss happened, before my thoughts caught up. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't clumsy. It was soft and hesitant, like a question neither of us wanted answered. I didn't push him away. That fact would haunt me more than anything else. But I didn't kiss him back either, not the way a person kisses when they're choosing something. I broke away, breathless, heart slamming against my ribs like it was trying to escape. "This can't happen," I whispered. "This shouldn't happen." He stared at me as if he wanted to speak, but I was already backing away. Then I left. I cried the entire drive home, gripping the steering wheel as if it could keep me from falling apart. I promised myself it was over, that whatever line we had crossed would never be crossed again. But deep down, under the promises, another thought whispered. Small and terrifying. He hadn't looked surprised. 2 days later, he knocked on my door. I knew who it was before I opened it. My body recognized him before my mind could argue. I should have ignored it. I should have pretended I wasn't home. I didn't. He looked exhausted, nervous, human. He said my name the same way he had that night, and something inside me cracked. Because a part of me had been waiting, even while hating myself for it. "I shouldn't be here," he said. I didn't answer. "I can't stop thinking about you," he added, voice low, like confession. The words hit me with equal parts disgust and relief, and I hated myself for feeling both. I told myself it would just be a conversation. Closure, an ending, something that would restore order to my life. It wasn't. We crossed the line again, completely this time. And when it was over, there was no romance in it, no fantasy fulfillment, just silence. Two people breathing in the dark, pretending they hadn't just detonated something sacred. I didn't feel chosen. I felt empty, ashamed. I lay awake afterward staring at the ceiling, realizing something terrifying. I didn't trust myself anymore. I had crossed a line I swore I never would, and I wasn't sure I had the strength to undo it. Still, a stupid, desperate part of me believed one thing, that he would tell the truth. That when faced with the reality of what he'd done, he'd take responsibility. That my sister wouldn't walk into a marriage built on lies, and if he didn't, then I would have to decide what kind of person I really was. I tried to pretend the next few days were normal. They weren't. Every sound felt louder, every silence heavier. I answered emails on autopilot, spoke to clients without hearing my own voice, nodded through conversations I barely registered. At night, I replayed everything. His words, the kiss, the way he'd stood in my doorway like the choice had already been made. I told myself I would not see him again before the wedding. That promise lasted exactly 12 hours. There were last-minute details to finalize, questions only he could answer, group messages where my name kept appearing next to his. Each notification felt like a test I kept failing. When we were in the same room, I avoided his eyes, spoke only when necessary, and left as soon as I could. He didn't push. That should have been comforting. Instead, it felt calculated, as if he knew he didn't need to chase me, as if he knew I was already trapped between guilt and hope, and all he had to do was wait. I began to understand something then, though I didn't have language for it yet. He was very good at letting other people destroy themselves for him. The night before the wedding, I barely slept. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the city breathe through the window. At some point, I sat up and whispered out loud, to no one, "Please tell the truth." I didn't specify who I was talking to. God, fate, him, myself. The morning arrived anyway. The church was beautiful in the way only places built for vows can be. Sunlight spilled through stained glass, painting the walls in colors that felt too gentle for what I was carrying inside my chest. People laughed softly. Music played. The air smelled like flowers and anticipation. I stood beside my sister as she adjusted her dress, her hands trembling. Not with fear, but excitement. She looked radiant, uncomplicated, certain. She squeezed my hand. "I can't believe this is happening," she whispered. I smiled and said nothing, because my throat had closed around words I wasn't sure I was allowed to say anymore. When the ceremony began, I took my place and focused on breathing. In, out, in, out. I told myself I could make it through, that I didn't have to do anything, that the truth would surface on its own, the way it always does. But as the vows began, something shifted. He spoke easily, confidently, his voice steady, his eyes warm. He didn't hesitate. He didn't stumble. He didn't look like a man weighed down by secrets. I felt something crack inside me. I waited for a sign. Anything. A glance. A pause. A breath that caught in his throat. But there was nothing. He looked like someone who had already decided how this would end. When the officiant asked for the rings, my heart began to race. My palms went cold. The room seemed to tilt. I stood up. The sound of the chair scraping against the floor echoed louder than it should have. Heads turned. Whispers rippled outward like a wave. My voice shook, but I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I swallowed and tried again. I can't pretend nothing happened. The words hung in the air, fragile and irreversible. My sister laughed at first. Not because she found it funny, but because laughter was easier than understanding. "What are you talking about?" she asked, looking between us. I turned to him. He didn't look at me the way someone does when they've been caught. He looked at me the way someone looks at a stranger who's interrupted a conversation. "I don't know," he said calmly. "I think she's confused." The word hit me like a slap. "I'm not," I said, my voice breaking despite my effort to stay steady. "You told me you had doubts. You kissed me. You came to my apartment." A murmur moved through the room. He sighed. Not defensively, not angrily, patiently. "This never happened," he said, placing a hand over my sister's. "She's been under a lot of stress. You know how she gets when she's overwhelmed." That's when I understood something else. Gaslighting doesn't come with shouting. It comes with composure. I turned back to my sister, desperation flooding my chest. "Please," I said. "I would never do this if it weren't true." I tried to stop it. I tried to walk away. Her face changed, not into confusion, but into something sharper. Hurt. Betrayal. "Are you jealous?" she asked suddenly. "Is that what this is?" "No," I said quickly. "This is about honesty." She shook her head, tears streaming down her face now. "You chose today," she whispered. "You chose to humiliate me." I opened my mouth to speak, but the officiant cleared his throat. Someone coughed. The moment collapsed under the weight of too many eyes. "I think we should continue," he said gently. "We can talk about this later." And just like that, the ceremony moved forward. I don't remember walking out. I remember the sound of the doors closing behind me and the sudden quiet that followed. Outside, the air felt unreal. I stood there for a long time, my body numb, listening to the faint echo of music inside the church. They got married. The days that followed blurred together. Messages from family members piled up. Some angry, some disappointed. All convinced I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I didn't respond. I didn't defend myself. I didn't know how. My sister didn't reach out at all, At night, doubt crept in. It was subtle at first. A whisper. What if you misunderstood? What if you exaggerated? What if you really are the problem? That's what gaslighting does. It doesn't just make others doubt you. It makes you doubt yourself. I threw myself into work. Longer hours, fewer breaks. Exhaustion became anesthesia. If I stayed busy enough, maybe I wouldn't think. Maybe I wouldn't feel. But anger has a way of surviving neglect. One night, unable to sleep, I opened my laptop and typed his name into a search bar. It wasn't intentional, just curiosity. Something to quiet the noise in my head. What I found didn't shock me. Photos. Comments. Women who weren't my sister. Smiles that felt too intimate. Captions that crossed lines without quite confessing to anything. Nothing explicit. Nothing undeniable. Yet. I started paying attention. Patterns appeared quickly once I looked closely. The same compliments. The same tone. Late-night likes. Private jokes hidden in public spaces. Familiar phrases reused like templates. This wasn't a mistake. This was a system. I felt something harden inside me. Not revenge. Not hatred. Clarity. I wasn't going to confront him again and give him another chance to twist reality. I wasn't going to beg to be believed. I was going to prove it, quietly. I contacted a local agency and asked for an actress. I explained just enough. I needed someone convincing, someone comfortable being recorded, someone willing to let the truth expose itself. She agreed. We planned everything carefully. She reached out to him using a new account, complimented him, engaged casually, let him lead. He did. Flirtation turned into invitation faster than I expected. The same charm, the same words, the same ease with which he stepped outside his marriage like it meant nothing. We recorded everything. Messages, calls, plans, promises he never intended to keep. I gathered more too. Other women, other stories. Different faces, identical experiences. When I sat down to compile it all, my hands shook, not from fear, but from sadness. I had loved someone who didn't exist, a version of him that had only lived in my head. I wrote my sister a message I rewrote dozens of times. I didn't accuse. I didn't justify myself. I apologized. Fully, honestly. I told her I was sorry for the pain I caused, for the timing, for the way it happened. I told her she didn't owe me forgiveness or even a response. Then I sent the evidence. After that, I let go. After I sent everything, I didn't wait by the phone. That surprised me most of all. I had imagined myself checking messages obsessively, rereading my apology, bracing for anger or disbelief. But once the files were gone, once the truth was out of my hands, something inside me went quiet. Not peaceful, just empty, as if my body finally understood that whatever happened next was no longer mine to control. Days passed, then weeks. No response. At first, I told myself that silence was better than rage. Then I told myself silence was worse. Then I stopped telling myself anything at all. I learned how to exist without answers. Work became steadier, calmer. I stopped using exhaustion as a weapon against my own thoughts. I went home at reasonable hours. I cooked real meals instead of eating whatever was closest. I slept. Not deeply, not always well, but enough. Sometimes, late at night, doubt tried to creep back in. It asked the same questions it always had. What if this wasn't enough? What if she still didn't believe you? What if you destroyed everything for nothing? When that happened, I reminded myself of something important. Truth doesn't require agreement to remain true. I didn't hear from my sister for almost a year. Life didn't freeze during that time. It moved forward in small, unremarkable ways. I expanded my business, hired someone new, took a short trip alone. I relearned how to enjoy quiet moments without filling them with self-punishment. I dated, briefly, carefully. Nothing serious. I was honest with myself for the first time in a long time about what I wanted, and what I no longer tolerated. If someone made me feel uncertain, small, or confused, I walked away. I wasn't interested in intensity anymore. I wanted calm. One afternoon, while I was reviewing invoices in my office, someone knocked on the door. I almost didn't look up. Clients rarely showed up unannounced. When I did, my breath caught. My sister stood there. She looked thinner, older. Not in years, but in weight. Like life had pressed down on her and reshaped her. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Neither of us moved. "I should have believed you," she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. I stood up slowly, unsure what expression my face was wearing. "You don't owe me anything," I said. And I meant it. She shook her head. "I do. I was angry. I was embarrassed. And I didn't want to see the truth, because seeing it meant admitting I married the wrong person." We sat down across from each other, the space between us filled with everything we hadn't said for a year. She told me how the marriage had started, how she'd tried to convince herself that love was supposed to be hard, that doubt was normal, that exhaustion meant commitment. She told me how the videos shattered the last illusion she'd been holding on to, not because they shocked her, but because they matched what her body already knew. The late nights, the vague explanations, the way she'd started questioning her own memory. "He made me doubt myself," she said quietly. "I thought I was just insecure." I nodded, because I understood that language now. The way reality gets bent slowly, gently, until you're apologizing for things you didn't do. When she finally left him, there was no dramatic confrontation, no confession, no apology. Just a suitcase by the door, and the understanding that staying would cost her more than leaving ever could. "I lost a year," she said, "but I could have lost myself." Something in her voice that day sounded stronger than it had in a long time. We didn't become close again overnight. Forgiveness doesn't work that way. It doesn't rewind time or erase memory. It creates space. Space where pain used to live. We started slowly. Coffee once a month. Short messages on birthdays. Conversations that stayed light at first, circling the past without stepping into it. But even in that careful distance, something important had shifted. The truth was no longer trapped inside me. For the first time since everything had happened, I slept through the night. Life took on a different rhythm after that. Not dramatic, just steady. My business grew, not because I was chasing success anymore, but because I'd stopped running from myself. I learned how to sit with discomfort instead of burying it under work. I learned how to say no, how to trust my instincts again. Dating returned slowly, cautiously. I wasn't interested in sparks or chaos or grand declarations. I wanted consistency, honesty. Someone who didn't make me question my own perception of reality. It surprised me how different love feels when it isn't built on secrecy. One evening, months after my sister and I had rebuilt something that finally felt like trust, she called me laughing. "You're not going to believe this," she said. She'd met someone. Actually, two someones. Identical twins. The coincidence felt absurd at first, almost symbolic in a way that made us both laugh harder than we had in years. She joked that fate clearly had a sense of humor. I told her the universe enjoyed irony far too much. What neither of us expected was that I would meet the other twin a week later. There were no fireworks, no instant certainty. Just conversation that flowed easily, without tension or performance. He asked questions and waited for answers. He didn't interrupt. He didn't rush. When he smiled, it felt uncomplicated. Later, when my sister and I realized what had happened, we sat in silence for a moment, and then burst out laughing. "Only us," she said, "after everything." We took it slowly. Both of us did. No rushing, no promises made out of fear. Just honesty, boundaries, a shared understanding that love should feel safe, not confusing. Sometimes, late at night, I think back to the woman who stood in that church, shaking, choosing truth over comfort. I think about how alone she felt, how certain she was that she had ruined everything. I wish I could tell her what I know now, that doing the right thing doesn't always look brave, that sometimes it looks messy and humiliating and lonely, that sometimes you lose people before you find yourself again. But I also know this: if I hadn't spoken up, I would have carried that lie forever. And no relationship, no family bond, no illusion of peace is worth the slow destruction of your own integrity. My sister and I don't talk about him anymore, not because it doesn't matter, but because it no longer defines us. What remains is stronger than what broke. Trust rebuilt carefully, love chosen consciously, and a bond that survived something most people never recover from. Some truths arrive too late to prevent pain, but they still arrive in time to prevent a lifetime of it.
So, that's the end of this story, but there are plenty of other great ones right here. Before you go, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring that little bell.